Interview with Ben Brown, former state representative in Georgia, by Cliff Kuhn, Georgia Government Documentation Project, October 31st, 1996, at Ben Brown's apartment in Atlanta, Georgia. You know, since we're talking about, are you ready to go?
Yeah, man.
Since we just talked about Pascal's, maybe we could talk about Pascal's as a kind of a meeting, the role of Pascal's in those years from, say, 60 to 64, 65, and beyond.
Well, Pascal's was a center for convening. I mean, everybody, ministers, politicians, businessmen, whites, black, visitors. It was a center. And you would hear people talk about it being the Mecca for black Americans, and things emanated from Pascal's that were significant to life for black Americans. Dr. King would meet there. Andrew Young would come through there. Of course, Andrew was with Dr. King at the time. I mean, he was a protege. But the local political gestation started right there. You get in there, you talk about who's going to run for office. I mean, you would actually name, there would be a group of people, the John Coxes, Jesse Hill would stop through there sometime, Q.B. Williamson. Those people would sit around and then they would discuss folk who ought to be running, who should be running. And next thing you know, they are running. And there was no formality to much of that. But it was just a place where people came and shared ideas, and many times it resulted into action.
You know, before we move into the state legislature, I was also interested in, you know, in that period, 60 to 65, maybe describe the Atlanta Negroes Voters League at that point compared to, you know, when you were a kid, and then also the All Citizens Registration Committee, too.
Oh, yeah. The All Citizens Registration Committee, it looked like to me John Calhoun headed that up. All Citizens Registration Committee, that crossed political lines. It's hard for me to separate out how I saw those two entities as a kid and as an adult.
Okay.
Because it was one continuum. I felt like I just grew up in it. The Negro Voters League was a bipartisan organization. I mean, the Republicans and the Democrats together voted on candidates, endorsed candidates, and affected elections in this town for years. They would endorse these people and send out the ballots in the mail. I mean, that's how sophisticated they were. They sent those ballots out in the mail. You got in mail a letter, a card saying, vote for, recommended by the Atlanta Negro Voters League. And it was signed by the powers that be, A.T. Walden, W.M. Jackson.
Who's W.M. Jackson?
He was a big Republican, Reverend Jackson. You don't hear his name much, but he was very, very strong in that Atlanta Negro Voters League.
Now, by the 60s, the Walden is kind of past his heyday, certainly. You know.
Oh yes, no question.
So, who are sort of the new people coming up into the Voters League? By the time, certainly by Horace's campaign, by your campaign, and so forth.
Jesse Hill, Hollowell, and
Johnson. Was Leroy involved or not?
Leroy Johnson. But see, Leroy was a politician himself, so his role was suspect. So he was there, but he kind of played it a little lower. But the League never recaptured the glory of the 50s. I mean, although it made a transition, when Jesse and them took over, it began to demise because, you know, people didn't know Jesse and them. They looked at them as upstarts who was, you know, trying to do something.
Just occurred to me, we haven't really talked about the mayoral races either with Hartsfield or in particular the one with Ivan Allen and Muggsy Smith and so forth.
Well, the Ivan Allen race, first one, I was out of town. I was in law school.
That's right.
But the black community supported him very strongly. And then one following that, Muggsy Smith was running. And I supported Muggsy Smith. The young folks supported Musgie.
Muggsy, right.
Muggsy Smith. He was a strange old man, probably no different from all the rest of them of that era. But he gave an image of progress, a progression, and progressive image, and fast. And I don't know why I was supporting him. You look to me, Julian was supporting him too. Yeah.
When you say he was a strange old man, meaning what?
Well, I mean, it was. I guess we were just excited, being conscious of the political process, and having the wherewithal to make our own choice about who we ought to support. And Muggsy was running against Ivan, wasn't he? Yeah. And I think Ivan had gotten a scar by putting up the pagan wall, and that was the thing that caused some of the younger folks to say, "Well, who is this man want to segregate us out?" He thought he was bad. But Ivan went on and won the election, but Muggsy gave him a good run for it, because Muggsy got most of the black votes.
Muggsy had been in the state legislature and had opposed the closing of the schools too. So.
Yeah, he had demonstrated a fairness that most of the white politicians had not demonstrated back in that day.
Now he's interesting to me because he's not really of the power structure,
Oh, he was from the proletariat. Oh, he was not of the blue blood families. And that was another thing that we could identify with. I mean, he was folksy, and he made it, made his mark that way.
Okay. Now, did I read somewhere that you had gone to the Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City?
Yeah, I was a page.
Okay. So,
1964.
Okay.
I went to, that was my first convention. And that was the first time we had an integrated delegation. Leroy and Johnny Yancey, I think, and Mr. Walden were delegates to that convention. And I went as a page. At that time, I was vice president of the Young Democrats of Georgia, the first black to serve in that capacity. And it was so exciting going up to Atlantic City. I remember driving with my friend I told you about, Buddy Hilliard Lee, who was very instrumental in my election, personal friend.
Right.
And
is that Hilliard or Hilliard?
Okay. Hilliard.
Okay.
And to get there and find out that my law professor, Pat Harris, was one of the principal speakers, and I was very proud of that. Because I'd never been to a national convention before. But I, studied them and all that stuff. So that was very exciting. And I went to every convention thereafter until 1988.
Here, right.
Well, no, I was here.
Right.
The one in New York, 92.
Right.
92. I went to every convention except 92.
Okay.
I served on the site selection committee for the Atlanta convention.
Did you or anybody else in the Georgia delegation in '64 have anything or any contact with Miss Hamer or
Well, we were. I didn't have any direct contact, but I'm sure somebody in our group did. We were so busy. I was so busy being excited about being there. I didn't get into the issues as much as what is the structure, what's going on, So I was awed by all of that and the magnitude of it, the excitement. I was conscious of the Hamer issue, and I was supportive of it, but I was not personally involved with it.
Well, maybe you could describe the process between, say, 60 and 65 of, increasing involvement of black Georgians in the state Democratic Party and the reaction of, state Democratic Executive Committee and so forth and so on, beyond Fulton County.
Yeah. But what happened with the Hamer thing is that it did open my eyes as to say what ought to be, So when I came back, I began to work more diligently to get more young people into the Young Democrats. Then the next year, 65, I got elected to the legislature, which took me out of the Young Democrats role and put me in mainstream.
Right. Well, let's talk about the Young Democrats, and again, what was the response of white Young Democrats to?
Well, we had a very liberal group. I mean, so that it was like, oh, we can do this together, and it was fun. It was fun. It was a group of young folk who wanted to show the nation that we're not backward and we're not afraid of each other down here.
Who were some of the folks involved? White
Well,
and
there's
black?
one person in particular, Barbara Johnson. She calls herself B. Johnson now or something. She's been going on to be a high fashion something. Wayman Wright was a friend whom I took and made president. He was the first black president, but I did it. That was, look back to me, Stu Eisenstadt came along during that
Oh, really?
period.
Okay.
I think Stu was a young Democrat along there with us. I might be putting that out of perspective. But this girl, Barbara Johnson, if you can ever find her, she can tell you who all those people were. I don't remember. I know. John Blackman, who is now, John is something with the state attorney. Oh gosh, I can see those folk right now. They all did all right. John Blackman, that's one of them. He's chairman of the state party now, I believe.
I guess I'm interested more in sort of, I mean, Vandiver is the segregationist, then you have George Stewart, the old guard segregationists who were powers in the state Democratic Party.
Travis Stewart. The executive director in 1965 was Cecil Miller.
Of the Democratic Party, okay.
When I qualified to run for office, Zell was the executive director of the party. And I went down there and put my name down, Benjamin D. Brown. He said, well, why you put all that down there? He said, you got a good political name. Why don't you put Ben Brown? And that's how I started using Ben Brown as my political name. So Zell was there. Zell had succeeded Travis Clark. Travis, some kind of Travis, who was Lester Maddox's executive assistant. Now Travis it wasn't Travis Clark, but Travis is his last name, was the nice guy. And he tried to be a blend between the old and the new, but he was with Lester Maddox.
Well, Maddox was elected in '66, though.
Yeah.
But we're talking, I'm talking even a little bit before then,
Okay, well, I had
because
moved
there's
into
still characters like, Peter Zagier around.
Well, Peter Zack was in the paper, though I didn't know Peter Zack.
Okay.
I mean, that was a little before. Vandiver, I didn't really know Vandiver. See, Carl Sanders was governor when I got elected.
Right.
And that's when my real hands-on knowledge began with the Georgia political scene. Now, Peter Zagier was an SOB as far as I was concerned. I mean, you talk about a redneck, that was a redneck. I mean, his neck was red, and his hair was pompadour. Oh, he was a mess. He was a womanizer, a drinker, and is he still living? Where is he, Albany?
Down that way. No, I think it's in between Macon and Albany somewhere.
Oh, he was a mess. He was absolutely a mess. But I could not find nothing positive to identify with on that.
How did you? Now you said before that you had already known Carl before you were.
Well, I knew
in office.
Carl because he was governor when I went to the convention in '64.
Okay, so he was head of the delegation.
Yeah, and he was the one who presented this image because they was kind of boosting him as a potential vice presidential nominee.
Moderate, New South.
Yeah, New South, but he was premature. Yeah, they were trying to pump him up to be that, and I was checking that out. And he was somebody you could be proud of. I mean, he was not.
He defeated Marvin in the election. Okay. So you're known already, in a sense, before you get sworn in. When we left last time, we were talking about, the bond affair. Anything else you want to add about sort of that weekend before getting sworn in and just?
Well, I think I talked about the compromises that we were trying to get going, and Howard said, "No, we ain't gonna do none of that. We're gonna go face the music."
And who else was involved with the process? Was Leroy? Or?
Leroy was involved. I was involved. Carl Sanders, George T. Smith, and then you don't. I think Ivan Allen might have been involved in that too. I mean, you don't know who else was involved, but those were the core people at the Capitol that I was relating to.
And, maybe you could talk about who was saying what and what was going on.
Well, my proposition, I can only speak for me,
Okay.
and basically I'll try to recall what I asked Julian, how far would he go to try to quell this thing? I said, oh, what can you do? I said, I know you can't go out there and apologize, but I think you could make some kind of conciliatory statement that would soften the confusion. And he gave some thought to that, but Howard came back and said, no, we ain't gonna do none of that. I was told Carl and them that they need to go to Sloppy Floyd and them and get them to withdraw the resolution. And we could work this thing out. That's what I presented to them. And they called me back and said, no, they won't accept that. They're mad, man. They're mad. And I think the final thing was, you keep your troops cool, we'll try to keep ours cool. Let's just get it resolved. That was the bottom line of it. But there was some very intense conversations going on. And I was just amazed that I was caught up in it. Everything just happened, spontaneously. I mean, it was not like I was prepared to do any of that.
Right.
It must have been.
And what a shock, right as you enter.
Yeah, it's like getting ready to go into a whole new bag. A whole new situation. And here I am. And then I got characterized as, just like Julian. Although I managed mine. Because I could have easily been the one that did the same thing, because they tried to interview me that day, but I don't ever give interviews without knowing what I'm giving the interview on.
Who was it? You mentioned Spivey, right?
The little news reporter. Julian and I were together most of that time. But I don't give interviews unless I know what I'm giving the interview on. And that's what I told her, because it could have easily been either one of us.
Right. Well, although he was with the organization and
I was the founder of SNCC. I was one of the founders of SNCC, so it could have easily been translated.
Right.
But they just had to pick on somebody whom they thought could get them the mileage they wanted. And that was to put up this last stand.
And Sloppy Floyd and
Sleepy Floyd.
Yeah, right. Sloppy Floyd and
He was a mess.
and who else was leading the charge?
Sloppy Floyd was just dominant in that whole thing. I don't remember any of the other people who. I guess I could pull it up if I thought about it.
Now, when you say he was a mess, let's elaborate.
What do I mean? He was a contradiction. He would say all these crazy things publicly about he would give racial epithets and just sort of race bait. In privacy, he was a very nice man, and he would show his humanity, his human instincts, which I didn't find to be biased.
In what kind of ways?
Just he would talk about things that you would talk about. He would talk about family. He would, things that would make you think that he was all right. And that's about as specific as I can be about that. But I liked him, and as a person until this came down, because we had been meeting in preparation for the legislature.
For the freshmen.
As freshmen.
And he was one of the legislative leaders. He wasn't.
Yeah, he
wasn't
chairman
speaker,
of.
But he was chairman of
appropriations.
Okay. Well, look, there were 7 or 8 in that first class? 9.
Was it 9? 8.
And
8.
Missed you and Julian.
Grace Hamilton. I'll go on with your point. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just keep on going, and it's just sort of. I want to get into sort of the 8 or the 9, and and sort of the learning the ropes.
Okay, Grace Hamilton, J.C. Doherty,
right.
William H. Alexander, J.D. Greer, Looked like to me Mr. Sheets or Harold Sheets or
Not Harold Sheets. Harold Sheets is, oh,
huh?
Harold Sheets is somebody, anyway.
Well, anyway, that
yeah.
was the Sheets there.
Uh-huh.
I don't know whether he was in that first group or not, but that was me, Julian, and how many was it? There was
I have, eight.
It
Yeah.
was 8.
Um,
Harold Sheets came later, I guess. E.J. Shepherd. E.J. was not in the first group. Oh, I know John Hood,
from,
Southside. John Hood was from the South. He's deceased now, died here.
okay.
John Hood.
And maybe describe, I mean, you and Julian are by far the youngest,
Yeah, we were the young.
and maybe describe the others and sort of, the differences and sort of what kind of communication you all had before, during.
Well, let's take Bill Alexander for an example. I knew Bill because he had come in to work at the law firm of Hollowell, Ward, Moore, and Alexander. So I knew him, and he's just a nice, mild-mannered, lawyer-like, strict. He wasn't a radical like me. I mean, see, Junior's not a radical either. Junior wasn't a radical. He didn't show his radicalism as much as I showed mine. They didn't know what to think of Junior.
What do you mean by that statement?
Well, I mean, nobody really tapped him as a radical until after the Vietnam statement. But mine has always been consistent prior to being in the legislature. These are conditions relationships you're saying. So I was like that. Bill Alexander was not considered a radical.
Right.
He was hardly considered black. Mrs. Hamilton was a real phenomenon because it was obvious that she had ties with the majority community somewhere down the line. I mean, real ties. It is reported that her grandfather was the governor of the state of Georgia or something like that. Governor Towns.
Governor Towns, right.
Something like that. But anyway, Grace did well for herself because she was the Urban League director and, father was in Clark at Atlanta University. And, I mean, she was just of the black aristocracy. But she was so smart.
Let me back up a bit for a while, because somewhere in there, didn't you work for the Urban League at some point?
Yeah, but not while Grace was there. Grace started it back in the 20s, like 1929 or something. Grace was an old lady.
Right, I remember.
Yeah, so I worked at the Urban League 1964. When the NAACP told me I couldn't work for them, I had to get me a job. And then I went over there as community services director at the Urban League.
Was Thompson still there? Robert Thompson?
No. Harold Arnold
Okay.
was the director at the time.
Okay.
Now, I could have become director of the Atlanta Urban League when Arnold left, but they wanted me to resign from the legislature. I said, no, I will not resign from the legislature.
Similar to the NAACP, not wanting you to.
Mm-hmm.
So you were not around the Atlanta Urban League when there was the split between the local and the national?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know too much about that? Okay.
I saw it happening, but I wouldn't.
You weren't.
I mean, the national Vernon caused a lot of schisms in the Urban League. People didn't want to follow his leadership. He lost several of those entities.
All right, so here's the new representatives. I'd first of all be interested in sort of knowing, obviously it's not only you, but it sort of changes in the Fulton County delegation from 3 representatives to however many,
21 or something like that.
All right, so talk about the dynamics within Fulton County first before we talk about sort of learning the ropes and reaction among the legislatures.
Well, you had Charlie Brown, and I forgot who those other 2 were.
Who had been the 3?
And who were the 3? And they had the Supreme.
Senator Milliken.
Yeah, Milliken, but he was gone. Yeah, he was just senator. But they all left real quickly because they just couldn't stand the change. It was just too much for them.
So they actually preferred it in the old days when the Fulton County
Had three.
had only three.
Yeah, it was more powerful than them. Here you are talking about a county with nearly 1 million people in it, with 3 representatives, dealing with them boys down there with 5,000 people who had 1. The
Right.
disproportion was, just out of whack, 99 to 1. So coming into that whole mix was a whole new dynamic. The leadership started to emerge out of what came from the new group, Sidney Marcus and Charlie Kahn. That's who started. Because Charlie was from that old South Side political clique, and they used to control the county,
Right.
South Boy. And somehow Charlie rose up to be one of the leaders. I'm trying to see who was the first chairman. Well, I wasn't threatened by any of it. I worked with them all night, and I was part of the clique that wanted the leadership of the group. So I had my way pretty much. And so I don't have clear thoughts
Right.
about
Okay.
that today.
Okay. Any mentors to you as you were actually now there? I mean, do you take a lesson from
Particular
Leroy, or anybody kind of sort of talk to you about sort of the way that
You should go?
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, no. Horace Ward was my mentor, period.
Right.
Horace was so subtle, you would never know unless you just felt what he was saying to you. And that's how I got my inspiration, not from Leroy.
Okay.
I looked
Good.
at Leroy, and I saw how he maneuvered. I was not unaware of his movements. But I was very clear on what I needed to do as a legislator. Me.
Which is what?
Which was to get in there, get to know the players, get to know the leadership, get to know the issues, and set an agenda and work it. And that's what I did.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't sit around there and wait for nobody to tell me what to introduce for legislation. I knew when I got there that I was going to be focusing on, number one, the historical significance that blacks had played in the history of the state, which meant education, trying to get the proper textbooks instituted in the system. And number two, I knew that housing was a critical part of my life and the life of the people whom I represented because of the dilapidation. And I said, there's got to be a role for the state in all of this. And this was a time when states were just moving into that across the country.
Right.
So one of the first things that I pulled out was the Georgia Housing Finance Authority. It was called then Georgia Residential Finance Agency. And I introduced that legislation. It took me 8 years to get it passed. But now it's full-fledging. Its first bond issue was $50 million to provide low-cost mortgages for low to medium income families. That's my proudest legacy. But that's what I focused on. Nobody had to tell me that. Another area I focused on, I don't tell too many people about, is automobile inspections. I was the proud person on that. Because that was a national, I was reading national stuff and seeing what the other states were doing. Auto inspection and auto safety and all were critical issues at the time. It was mid-60s. And I brought that discussion to the table in Atlanta. And I was able to get my package passed. Now, they've modified it over time. Matter of fact, they eliminated one part of it. But if you go back and study the history, it was I who instituted the automobile inspection sticker laws.
Okay.
As it relates to local legislation, I said these were global in the sense of the state.
Right.
And I could not be so myopic that I would focus only on Hunter Street or Auburn Avenue. I mean, that just wasn't where I was coming from. But I did take an interest in the structures of government, Fulton County and the city of Atlanta. And we had to pass enabling legislation to accommodate both of those entities. So Grace and I collaborated on the rewriting of the charter for the city of Atlanta to provide for those district elections that we talked about, and to clearly delineate the power of a vice mayor as opposed to the president of city council. We did all that.
This is, when is this? This is the
This
70s,
is
early
more.
70s?
This is more like 71, 72,
Yeah, and then
somewhere
the
around.
Charter Revision Committee that she
74.
served on.
Yeah, she was the chairman. I was there with her.
Okay.
We were driving it. I mean, a lot of it.
And it
Grace and I
was,
worked together on that very closely. It wasn't-
Bondurant was on it, and I can't remember all
well,
the
I'm
people.
talking about the legislative side.
Oh, the legislative side, okay.
The city did appoint a committee to.
And I think Grace was on that committee, too.
Yeah, she
if I'm
was
not
the
mistaken.
legislative liaison. to
Okay,
that.
I see.
But I'm speaking of legislative.
Okay.
So
Oh,
I
well-
feel very proud of that contribution. And then another thing I did in terms of structure of government was to propose a consolidation of the city and Fulton County. I was like too soon on that. But I put it out there. I had just come back from MIT during my urban studies, my highfalutin study and observation of consolidated governments around the country. And I said, this makes sense. Why don't we do this? I came back home and I was guest speaker at the Hunger Club and I presented my plan. And Maynard Jackson and all the would-be politicians at that time got so frustrated with me. And I said, man, what are you going to do, dilute the vote? I said, man, by the time we get through, well, first, it ain't going to be no dilution because white folks don't live in Fulton County anymore. Even then, they didn't realize that. The numbers were good enough then. I'm talking about 1974. The numbers were good enough to elect a black overlord.
Mm-hmm.
But they were scared. So. I said, well, you're going to keep on postponing your old taxing the people you say you represent. You're making it convenient for the people you say you dislike. Because they come in here and they do everything. They don't pay nothing for it. But if you have one tax base or consolidated tax base, the city and the county, you would equalize the burden. That's what St. Paul, Minneapolis does. They have a little tax system that will equalize the burden among the counties and the cities, and everybody pays. But mainly I'm just worried about getting elected. So I put it out there, and I stuck by it, I didn't back up on it. And I'm sorry we didn't adopt it. Now they're around here talking about we ought to consolidate government.
It's going to be harder to do now.
It's harder to do now because, and maybe it won't be harder to do because the county, everybody's accepted the fact that Fulton County is a black county. It might not be, but the problem, the problem is that you got a black county government, you got a black city government, and when they get to fight, it ain't going to be no coming together. No, that's right. You're right. It will be harder.
Let's go back. The reaction from the white state reps to the
Consolidation plan?
no, to you all coming in. What was sort of the reaction, the etiquette, response
From the county or
No,
from
I'm
the
talking about
at-large?
from your, the
At-large.
other representatives in the Georgia General Assembly, rural as well as urban, outside of Atlanta as well as local.
Well, you had the old timers. I mean, the boys who've been there because that's what they're supposed to do for 30, 40 years.
For whom, for instance,
Oh,
on the House side,
on the house side, you had Lane.
Lane. Okay.
Lane. Just put that name down, Lane.
Lane.
I can't think of his first name.
Not the guy from East Point, Dick Lane.
No,
it's,
Dick
different. No,
Lane.
Okay, I'll find that one out.
Anyway, he represented in Sloppy Floor in that group. They represented that old guard who were suspicious. I mean, they just couldn't believe black folk were there. Therefore, they took like on the private side, they were very nice. Tommy Irvin and all of them. Tommy was a young man at the time.
Right.
But Tommy, he's a whole different category. But anyway,
Let's
let's
do,
categorize them.
let's do the different groups. Yeah.
Okay, now, Lane. Ooh, the names escape him.
Okay.
It was a whole group of them McCracken.
McCracken.
Oh,
Roy McCracken.
Roy
No.
McCracken.
Is that right?
Yeah, Roy. He was in the Senate, wasn't he? Or the House.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that was that group.
He had been active in the Griffin administration.
Oh yeah, they were all Griffin Talmadge. They were all Talmadge. This crowd was basically the residue of the Talmadge, Eugene Talmadge.
Is T.V. Williams still around? Is that his name? From Northwest Georgia? Or Taxi Smith from Albany? Or okay, I'm just trying to figure out who we're talking about.
We're talking about
Dixon Oxford.
We're talking about the mean boys from the old Eugene Talmadge, Peter Zach Gill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now I tell you a guy out of Millersville, Kid. Culver Kid.
Mm-hmm.
Culver was out of that group. He was a young guy in that group.
Right.
But he came down the line. All right, let's take them and put them aside a minute. Then you come up with the George L. Smiths and the George T. Smiths, who were smart enough to know that change was coming, going to be there, and they need to extend. So they made it very comfortable for us, for me in particular. George and I got to be very close.
Which George?
George T.
Okay.
Who
was your first speaker that you spoke with, right?
We got to be very close friends. And they knew that this was not going to be a reversible trend, that they're going to have to adjust. And you had people like Dick Lambert, or Roy Lambert. G.D. Adams. G.D. was more like the old guard, but this man, Frank Lee, from East Point.
Oh, Bill Lee.
No,
Frank Lee. Okay.
He was a pilot. Jack Etheridge.
Okay.
Roy Lambert stands out in my mind. He was a decent white man. That's what we looked at him then. He was a decent white man. You could have a conversation with him, and you knew he was honest, and he wasn't scared of you, and you weren't scared of him.
Other folks, in contrast, were scared of you?
Yeah, they were scared. They didn't know what we would do.
How did it show itself?
Well, they would be reluctant to, talk. And I don't know how you quantitate that. You can feel it when people have apprehension about you, what you're going to do. I mean, verbal free, whatever. But you can also tell when a guy is accepting your own power, because conversation flows, energy flows. Now, I cannot put language to that, no more than what I just said.
Right.
But that's the way I felt.
Right.
Then there was another group of young white boys over there. Sidney Marcus, Gerald Horton, Joe Felton. Then these were the children of the politicians of the first group I told you about. Feltons, Wade Mitchell types. Wade wasn't over there, but I'm trying to think, my crew.
What is like Bobby Rowan
Bobby Rowan. Bobby Rowan was dangerous to me.
Okay.
He fitted somewhere, although he was young as hell. He fitted in the old group. He couldn't tell the winds. He and Jimmy Bentley and that crowd, they could not. They misread the winds. They switched around parties and they lost out. They thought that's what they were supposed to do. But they were all kids of the Talmadge era.
Okay.
And Bobby was, as far as I'm concerned, fitted in that group. I could not figure Bobby out. And of course, his record went on to prove that, I think. Yeah.
How about Groover?
Oh, that's one of them guys from the first group. Yes, Grover. What's it?
Denmark Groover, yeah.
Denmark. Woo! Denmark I thought was a mean man. And he was in that first group. And he probably was as gentle as he could be, but he was one of those people who were afraid to open up and let it flow. I mean, he gave you stares and And I can't say that he manifested cruelty toward me, but it just wasn't the kind of free thing that I expect when I'm engaged with humankind. I thought he was mean.
You feel uncomfortable?
I felt very uncomfortable around him. Sloppy Floyd, no. Sloppy and I had a great relationship. And then there was a guy named Mac Barber.
Right.
Now, Mac was funny. He was deceiving. He was deceitful because you would think that he was the old remnants of the Eugene Talmadge bigotry. But he was really nice. He was one of the smartest politicians over there. He was good on every side. On every side. And I like Mac. I like his agility. And then he would give you real, enthusiasm. And he would go over there and give them real enthusiasm. I mean, he was good. I mean, to be able to do that, I think is a skill.
What about...
Some people say being all things to all people. Okay, if you got that skill, you're good.
Okay, but that's what he would do.
Yeah.
What about sort of younger guys who were coming up in the House at that time, like Tom Murphy and George Busby?
Glad you're raising him because George Busby was one of those Jack Etheridge type. He's in that middle group. George and Joe Frank Harris. Tom Murphy, I just didn't get this. I didn't get a good feeling on Tom Murphy, and of course he didn't have a good one on me either. Tom Murphy is the reason why I was clear that I was leaving the legislature, because when he came in, I was a senior member had more tenure on the education committee than anybody. The committee had almost depleted. He kept me on the committee and brought in a whole new committee and made somebody else chairman. And I said, well, I guess the system ain't made for me. Not Tom Murphy's system. Now this was during that interim between the death of George L. and coming of Tom. Because I had secured George L. in his district going down. Coca-Cola asked me to go down there and keep him in office.
Down to Swainsboro.
Yeah. They were about to pull a revolution on him and get him out. He'd almost lost his election, that last election he had. And I went down there at the behest of some people who represented Coca-Cola. They said, man, we need George L. And you got to go down there and help us save him. So I went. I did my part. And I was supposed to get a chair out of that. That would have been the first chair. And he died before he was sat. And that was the end of my legislative career right there, 1975, basically.
But before then, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell me that story, because that's an interesting story. You're saying that as Speaker he had... what was his relationship to Coca-Cola as shown?
As Speaker, shit, all that stuff that Coca-Cola has had regulations and stuff, I don't know the specificity of it, but I know the interest of Coca-Cola was thrown up in my face as to motivate me to go down there and save George L. Smith. I didn't have any problem working with George L. Smith because he was the Speaker of the House, and I was a member of the House, and I did want a chair. So I know how to give and I know how to take.
Who approached you?
My doctor.
that
Albert Davis.
Okay.
And I don't know how Albert got the line on it. I said, Albert, what are you doing hooked up with George L. Smith? He said, don't you worry about it. You just get your ass down there and let's make sure this man stays. Because the guy who was running against him was not good. That wasn't to say that he would not have been a contender for the
How did you know that Dr. Davis was hooked up with Coca-Cola interests?
Well, that came out in the conversation. Sid Davis and those people over there at Coca-Cola, they take care of their political work. And they obviously had something, I don't know what the specificity of that was at the time.
Right.
But they had an interest in keeping George L. Smith
so he
at the helm.
Keep stuff stopped up in committee or whatever.
Or whatever. I don't know.
Okay.
I wouldn't even purport to guess.
Right.
All I know is that I was very pleased that they thought I was important enough to make that happen.
Now, you came in before legislative independence of the governor, when the governor still appointed the committees, and the governor was much more powerful. So talk
In the
about
Senate. No, which
not-
committees you
no,
speaking?
well,
House committees?
Didn't
No,
Carl
they
still appoint the committees?
House committees?
Yeah.
No,
By that
no.
time, it's the speaker.
No, the Speaker appoint committees.
All right, but let's talk
I've
about.
never known the governors appoint House committees.
Well, that was earlier.
Really?
Yeah. Let's talk about your relationship with both George T., who's your first speaker, and then Carl, your first governor.
Well, my relationship with Carl, because see, Carl was on his way out when I was coming in. So I got to know him better when he was out of the governor's office. Working on National Democratic Party stuff.
Okay.
George
That's
T.
right. He
Smith.
just had one more year.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, he was out by the time I got there because he was out. It was for had Lester Madison inauguration January '66.
Actually, Maddox is 67.
67.
But, yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
But he's on his way out.
Yeah. December '66. Carl was out. But anyway, George T. was just a nice old country boy, and I liked him. And his wife played a very important part too, and he would always have her there. So there was something about that was interesting to me. I guess it was that family thing. He's just like an uncle or something. And that's what I felt about George. And when he ran for lieutenant governor, he asked me to help him, and I did. And we just got to be real close friends. George L. Smith, as speaker, and we had our distance. But see, George was in that old group, so by the time Papa Dent was there, and Albert Thompson, and so he opted out to relate to them, because I was too young,
So
George looked at me as a boy. George T. did.
George T. Okay.
As a kid that he just cuddled.
Right.
George L. looked at me as a boy trying to be a man, therefore I will keep him at bay.
Okay. How, again, sort of give a for instance, or specifics.
When George L. came in, I was like 20. I went there at 25, so I was 26, and I was very aggressive. I was always in his face about something. And
I've heard it said that you, Julian, and Bobby Hill were the three, really, who came out of a movement background. Is that accurate?
It is correct.
Okay, and how would you describe the three of your styles and sort of vis-a-vis, the other?
Well, we were all different. We all had different styles. Julian had a no style. Julian didn't do nothing in the house. Not that I know of. He sat right next to me. Bobby Hill was very active on the constitutional questions. He enjoyed listening to himself on the floor. He was flamboyant, and he was excellent, and he was brilliant. He could get a point and twist it. Them boys didn't know what he was talking about. But, some of us did. So he was a brilliant lawyer. But Julian was scared. Julian got scared after that thing. So he sat quiet. He's been more active. He was more active in the Senate, but he was very quiet in the House. Right. Very quiet. But I would push him, and every time I did something, I made sure his name was on as a co-sponsor.
Right.
I just did it automatically. I didn't even ask. That's the kind of relationship. And when they would be negotiating those things, they would come around and ask. They knew that there were two votes there together.
Right. Okay, so when something was...
We were always... And you would break away sometime and let me know. We different on a couple of things, but basically, those two votes went the same way all the time. And many times Julian would be out of town and I would take care of his vote. And he wouldn't be at his desk either when it was needed. When it was needed. Yeah.
Okay, 65, Voting Rights Act. Let's talk about its impact in the state of Georgia and your involvement in registering people across the state and the other, your and other efforts to register.
Well, 65 Voting Rights Act was very critical to the movement. It was that next phase from the protests in the streets, the legislative mandate, which captured what we were protesting about. I think that legislation enabled motivated people of my generation to get more actively involved in politics. Somebody took time to teach a lot of us how to register, how to target, and how to get elected.
Let's go through that process and who's the somebodies that we're talking
Well, the
about.
somebodies were the NAACP, the Urban League, and even the, you had voters' leagues in most places. And Southern Regional Council, Voter Education Project. I'm giving it to you as time moved on. Operation Vote. There are all sorts of organizations that popped up to interpret what 1965 legislation meant. And to me personally, it meant that we had a chance to get more involved and to secure ourselves in positions of public trust. In terms of my initial election, it didn't matter much because I was already out there before it was implemented.
And it was before it was implemented, and yours is more the result of reapportionment than court case than
right.
Voting Rights Act. But I mean, talking about,
well, it certainly stimulated more people wanting to run for office at every level, city, county, state. And the more activity you had in getting people registered, the more candidates you had. And you look at Mississippi, which was the primary area, Mississippi has more black elected officials than any state in the union. And that's because they had a very active registration piece. They found out that they had the numbers. And they only found out because they were registering folks, And they didn't feel the fear of intimidation after the 65 Voting Rights Act.
Let's talk about your own involvement and your involvement sort of with each step of the process, beginning with registration and then, choosing candidates and then running candidates and then, actually voting at the polls and, sort of from, and as you talk about it, maybe you could talk about, both what you witnessed, the internal, external obstacles needed to be overcome to ensure black participation in the process.
Okay, I missed that.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, too long. Let's go back to sort of your own efforts at, outside of your own campaign in terms of, black participation in the political process.
Oh, yeah, well, by the time I got out there on the circuit, I started getting invitations to go places to talk. So I was speaking all over the country. One of the most exciting speeches was to Wichita, Kansas for the youth meeting of the NAACP. And their focus was voter education. And I was a guest speaker, having been nominated to be in the legislature. This is how I helped in voter registration and stimulate more political participation. Went to Wichita. Of course, that was my first time out in Kansas. Then I got invited to Houston, Texas to speak at the inaugural kickoff of a campaign for a young fellow who was running for the state legislature. Living proof. Here's Ben Brown, 25 years old. This guy was 26, 25. If he can do it in Georgia, y'all can do it in Houston. That was the message. So it was that kind of thing where I found the role. And
how about within the state of Georgia, too?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would go out and speak to the different groups in Savannah, in little country towns, churches, Men's Day. And, I did that a lot. Matter of fact, I don't know too many of the Georgia black politicians who did as much as I did in terms of non-Atlanta activity. I did a lot of it.
Well, again, there's so much attention on Atlanta. I'm always very interested in what goes on outside of Atlanta.
Oh, man, I wish you would go down there and find out, just like, you got to talk to Wesley Law. You've already talked to him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a guy down in Billy Hutchins in Macon.
think you mentioned him.
I mentioned him, the funeral home director.
Right.
He and his wife Betty, they would have a wealth of knowledge. But I used to go to all over the towns. Albert Thompson down in
Columbus, right?
And I'm giving these big cities, but the Locust Groves, the Dublins, the Griffins, the Bondsville.
Who was the guy in Griffin? Wasn't there somebody, Touchstone?
There's one family of them, Touchstones, and the other family is, I guess Touchstone is about the biggest one then. Hurd.
Heard. Heard. Is that right?
Or is it Head?
I don't know.
Head,
Okay.
Head,
Okay. How about, what's his name, in Cartersville?
Oh my God.
Robert Park.
Robert Parks. I didn't catch on to Robert until later. But Herman Talmadge made Robert Parks, and when I started spreading out across the state, everybody said, well, do you know Robert Parks? Robert Parks. I finally got a chance to meet him in late years. Is he still around?
I think so.
Wow.
Well, what was his role?
He was Herman Talmadge's man. I mean, he was Herman Talmadge's black guy in the state. And I don't think Robert Parks would ever come to Atlanta, because he recognized that there were more black folk outside of Atlanta than there are in, and he made those circuits. And it was, I guess he presented the model that I followed, unknowing what the model was.
Okay. And when did Herman hook up with Parks?
Oh, I don't know, but it must have been when he first went out there in the 50s.
Okay. So you think Herman was recruiting black voters?
Oh, yeah.
Even at the time?
He was talking all that foolishness. Yeah. And paying them well. Now, see, when I started doing North Georgia, I paid homage to Mr. Parks, but I didn't sit there. I went on to a guy named Neil, who is a funeral director up there in Toccoa.
Where there had been black voters, Stevens County, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's been a great little town.
That's an interesting story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And wasn't there a funeral director in Americus too?
Mr. Bonham. Bonham.
Right.
Yeah.
And then who was Curtis Atkinson?
Atkinson.
Tell me
He was a
his story.
successor to Robert Parks. Curtis comes from down that way, I think.
From
Bainbridge or something like
South
that.
Georgia. Okay.
Well, I know Curtis. I mean, he was a good guy. But he was the modern version of Parks.
In that, meaning what?
In that he didn't want to just do the groundwork. He wanted to be on Front Street in the office. And he was the guy who wore the tie. And he worked on Talmadge's staff. I mean, he was the first guy that really Talmadge put out there and said, oh, this man's on my staff. He didn't say, this man is working for my campaign. But Curtis did an excellent job for Herman. He represented well. But he was the first black confidant that I knew about, who worked, who was shown. He was the showpiece. But he worked. He was capable. Mm-hmm. Robert Parks was capable too, but Talmadge wasn't about to have him working in his office in Washington. But Curtis did.
Okay. What about Flanagan and the NAACP?
Oh, that was a bad time. I don't know. Flanagan never got his foot together on that. I never knew what Flanagan was doing with NAACP when he was there. I just never knew. Is he still around?
He done.
Yeah. I don't think he was succeeded at much of anything he was doing. I mean, it just looked like a bumbling kind of experience.
Okay.
I was on my way out when he was doing his thing. I was on my way
To Washington.
national. Yeah.
Okay.
But I just did not know. I'd be interested to know what others said about him.
In terms of statewide kind of mobilization of black people in politics, what impacted the Maynard-Jackson challenge to Herman Talmadge in 1968?
Well, it created a lot of believability. The impact it had was that My organization was working with Maynard on that. I traveled around the state with Maynard.
Your organization was what?
Wright, Jackson, Brown, Williams, Stevens, and Bond. We were the PR agency that was working with Maynard.
Okay, who is the Jackson, Williams, Stevenson, and
Wright was Wayman Wright, who came here as a publicist for the Falcons, first
Okay.
one of the Braves, one of them. Right. Jackson was Warren Jackson, who was a guy who wanted to do some public relations in town, and I'll tell you more about that. Wright, Jackson. Brown was Ben Brown.
Stevenson, you said?
Stevens, he was a PR guy who was working with WSB.
Okay.
And
Bond.
Williams, Chuck
Oh.
Williams was Maynard's guy, who had come down from Syracuse to Buffalo, one of them godforsaken town, to be with Maynard, and Julian Bond.
So you had a PR.
We had a PR firm, but everybody was trying to do that on their own. And I told them, I said, man, why don't we get together and make this a first-class operation? So we were finally able to bring them together, and we rented space at the Equitable Building, downtown Atlanta, 18th floor, 1969. Can you imagine? We thought we were hot shit. And we were. And we did Maynard's campaign that year, 68. And we had not formed totally. I guess we had, because the campaign was 69.
68.
Was it 68?
68.
Well, we were in business in 68.
Okay.
After that election, Herman Talmadge was in our office that Saturday morning. Herman Talmadge was in our office. So about what impact did he have? This son of a bitch was in our office in person, acknowledging the job we had done, and wanted to know how he could help us down the road. And that happened. Now, mind you, Julian stayed with the firm a month. That was a very ugly situation. Julian stayed with the firm a month. And I don't know, he never told me all the details, but I got enough to be disgusted with that. Somebody at Warrior was going to give a contract to the firm through him. He took the contract and went somewhere else with it.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say about it.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the Jackson campaign as you accompanied the Jackson campaign across the state of Georgia.
Well, we arrived out of a little private plane, and I took him to places that I knew, the places I'd been. See, I was 3 years ahead of him out there now, on the state.
How had you gotten all the state contacts?
Well, because I had been working with George T. Smith and that kind of thing. NAACP, Georgia Democratic Party. See, I got real busy. And about 68, I had been appointed to the Charter Commission of the National Democratic Committee with Jim Hunt, Jay Rockefeller, Sherman Manette. People, those are my peers in the political party.
Right.
And I brought all that back home. And I knew, that I knew where the people were.
So your
Black
role.
and white.
So your role in the Jackson campaign was what? As you go.
I didn't
around
have
the
a
state?
title. I don't usually wear
Right.
too many titles, but
But what? did
I
you
just
do?
coordinated some appointments for him, took him to places where I thought he needed to be.
Again, I'm kind of interested in kind of what impact this first statewide campaign against Herman Talmadge had, throughout the state.
Well, the fact that Maynard Jackson was running against a living legend inspired a generation of people. It woke up some old people, scared them to death, but it woke them up. Plus, he got nearly 400,000 votes. It showed what the numbers really are. And that was only 25, 30% turnout. And if if you could, and that's impossible, but if you could get a maximum turnout, 95% turnout, you could do a lot of things statewide. But that's what the election of Herman Talmadge did. It showed what the potential is.
And you said the next Saturday, Herman was in your office.
In our office on the 18th floor at 100 Peachtree Street. And we were shocked. I mean, it was almost like unannounced. I mean, I don't know how he knew we were going to be there that Saturday morning. But he was in that office. Maybe it was rearranged, but I didn't know about the arrangement.
And there he was.
And there he was. Oh, yeah, that was the greatest recognition that, all right, black folk, y'all know y'all exist. We know you exist. Now let's work out something. That's what that was.
Well, again, in your encounters with Herman over the years, how would you describe him along those lines, in terms of being?
Well, I think he grew up real fast. He grew up real fast as a result of that election. So fast that he got frightened. His drinking problem became very acute. And I'm going to share this embarrassing situation for the history of this, for the significance of this oral history. When Jimmy Carter became president, Jimmy was a little embarrassed by Herman Talmadge, but he was our senior senator. So on one of the trips that I took on Air Force One, we came to Georgia. I went somewhere, Georgia, I think. Herman came with us. Herman had overindulged. And he was overindulged, so he staggered. And none of his friends wanted to be close to him. So I sort of eased up to him. He caught a hold of my shoulder. And I walked him off that plane. That was, I know that had to be the saddest day of his political career. He was still in politics. But I was the one that reached my hand out, said, come on, Senator, let's roll. It hurt me. I mean, I'm sitting up here with my senator, whom I had forgiven for all of the ills and sins of his mouth, because he wasn't as bad as he talked. And here he was, just completely drunk. And Jimmy and them didn't look at it. I mean, they were so embarrassed, but I couldn't let the man be out there by himself. I mean, nobody, I don't know where his staff was. Looked like somebody would have been with him.
I wanted to, you just talked about the Jackson Challenge in '68. I wanted to go to another event that I know that you and Julian split on. Some of it's public record, some of it's not. The episode surrounding the Chicago Democratic Convention and the Georgia Challenge, and the split within the Georgia delegation.
Let's start with the Georgia Challenge.
Take us back to Macon or wherever the story begins.
Well, it starts before Macon. Georgia Democratic Party Forum. That was an organization that was set up as a counter organization to Lester Maddox. Lester Maddox.
Okay, and when and by
this
whom?
was I also served on the Rules Commission. That was the first commission, the Rules Commission of the Democratic National Committee, where we wrote the rules to include greater participation on the part of minority and blah, blah, blah.
That's a little bit later, though, right?
No, 68.
Okay.
I had my charter commission was later.
Right, okay.
68 was the Rules Commission. It was the O'Hara Commission. And we wrote the rules, and so I was all fired up about reform in Georgia. So we just got through with the national stuff. So came back, Al Kerr the Labor Board set up the Georgia Democratic Party Forum, and I was quite instrumental in it. And we said, we're going to challenge the selection process in Georgia. I called Julian. I said, Julian, come on, help us out. We need your fight. Oh, dude, I ain't got time. I don't want to do this. All right, we kept on playing. I kept on going. I called him the day before we went to Macon. I said, Julian, are you going to go down with us? So when I got down there, here comes McCarthy and these buses and Julian Bond. I could have shit it. I mean, it really made me so mad. I was so mad with Julian. And I'm trying to say, now, what happened over 24 hours that caused him to do this? I don't want to think that he lied to me throughout that process. I just want to never accept that. I don't know what he told you, but I would never accept
I don't know either.
So I'm gonna ask him one day, Julian, why did you do me like that? All right, that wasn't even part half of it. So we go down. We're gonna have a convention anyway. We had plenty of people. They had plenty, but we were surprised. They had more people than we had. Now Omni, I had gotten John Conyers to come down and be the keynote speaker
Oh, right.
at the
Congressman.
convention.
This is
Yeah.
a rump.
This was a rump convention to elect delegates to Chicago
But it wasn't
to
the-
challenge,
Yeah.
to challenge Les
Okay.
Maris delegate,
Right.
which was handpicked.
Right.
Okay, MacArthur people scooped in on it, and we didn't look at them as adversaries. We looked at Maddox as adversaries. So we had no idea we were getting something from the left. So they came down there. They took over all of our congressional caucuses. They named their chairman. Julian took over the 5th Congressional District Caucus. I said, why do you have to do this? That doesn't make sense. Anyway, he did that. They took over all 10 of them. And then tried to make me convention chairman. I refused. I couldn't take it like that.
Convention chairman.
Of the whole convention.
Okay, of the rump convention.
Of the
Okay.
rump. They wanted to make me the permanent chairman of the convention.
And who?
Which would have been nice for somebody who was ego-ridden or driven. But I was just so frustrated by the tactics that they had used.
Who are active in the McCarthy movement in
Georgia? No, nobody. They just came and got Julian and got the people. I don't remember anybody in Georgia who was from McCarthy. I didn't even know Julian was from McCarthy.
But he had been connected somehow with the McCarthy
Obviously.
campaign.
And he came up at that rump convention as a McCarthy person, and
All right, so
they took over. They took it over, and all of us, the Democratic Party Forum folks, left the convention. We went upstairs.
That includes Kara.
Everybody. We left the convention, and I left and came home because I was sick. I was sick. My friend had stuck me in the back, and I said, damn, Julian, why do you do this? This didn't make no sense to me. It hurt. And I don't think I've ever told him how badly that hurt. Because it could have worked out, and he could have had everything he wanted. But I think he was used in that situation. But anyway, they won. And they made me co-chairman of the protest delegation to Chicago anyway, in my absence. They put Julian and me on there. Because they knew how hard I worked on this thing. And obviously how Julian had, come up on the side and kind of embarrassed me. But anyway, I made up. I'm a forgiving guy. So Julian and I go to Chicago to the Credentials Committee. We go up 2 weeks before, or a week or so before the convention starts. And looked like to me, I don't know where we stayed. We stayed at the Conrad Hilton. Somebody got rooms for us. We talked about staying at the Y. I think some stories have said that. I didn't stay at the Y.
Right.
Julian didn't stay at the Y.
Right.
But stories say
Okay,
that.
well, you were at
We were at the Conrad Hilton.
Yeah.
That's where I was. And I had friends at the Edsel, which was right across the street. But anyway, we made our presentations to the committee, and who was chairman? Governor Hughes of New Jersey was chairman. Richard Hughes. And we made our presentation, and we won the battle a little bit. We won 50% of the battle. Now, getting to that point of resolution, I was on the phone to Ivan Allen constantly because he and Richard Hughes were friends. And I was saying, I said, Governor, I don't know, Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether we can get, he wanted all of the less than max people out. I said, we got,
Ivan did?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. We're going to have to compromise.
Ivan had run against Lester twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I said, we're going to have to compromise this thing. And I ended up being a compromiser, 50-50. And then once we got that broken down, then it broke down another way. There was a fight between our 50%. Lester had his 50%, 20 votes, and we had 20. And then we broke ours down
It's McCarthy and Humphrey, or
to McCarthy and Humphrey. And there were half votes here, and half votes. The party people voted 20 votes. So it worked out to be a very interesting experience. But I was right in the middle of it, and ironically enough, I got to know Governor Hughes' son, and we're friends today. He was in New Jersey. I got to know him through business.
Huh.
And Governor Hughes was one of my heroes.
Now, you said it was an interesting experience. I think you've only told part of that story. Let's tell more.
Well, I was still angry.
Okay. You were still angry, you were saying. Okay, back to Chicago. You were saying you were still a bit mad.
I was still a bit mad because I was out there busting my balls trying to work this thing out. Day in and day out. Working, calling to Atlanta, calling...
This is the challenge to the Maddox.
Yeah, this was all challenge. We were the Cinderella team in 68. And the focus was on us, and for some reason, I assumed a responsibility to work it out.
Well, it's your role. It's what you've done.
Yeah, that's just my role. And once we got it worked out, we got to the floor, and Julian had started hooking up with these people from Wisconsin, Peterson, and all those boys. I was totally unaware of all of that stuff, the McCarthy stuff. And then somebody over there in Wisconsin nominated Julian for vice president. Julian runs to me and tell me, then I can't accept that. You tell him. And that's just what he said. I said, well, I mean, we were all shocked. I was. I don't know whether Julian was shocked or not. I couldn't believe that he was surprised by that. I can't believe that he was surprised by that. But it appeared that he was. Now, why else would he come to me and tell me to respond for him? Carl Albert was at the podium and he said, "Would the gentleman from Georgia identify himself?" I never did. But somehow we got through the parliamentary step there. And
Which step are we talking about?
To announce that Julian Barr was ineligible to be nominated for vice president.
Didn't he decline on the floor? Didn't he?
He didn't
I
do
remember
that.
seeing him on national
Julian
television.
did not decline on the floor. I was a speaker in response to the nomination. Julian came over and asked me to tell them that he was ineligible.
So you spoke on the floor.
Go back and check the film out.
I know for a fact. Well, I
You-
certainly
you-
remember.
You might have said something later, but he came over there and told me to tell the people.
Maybe what you were saying was, not what was on television and what he said
What
was
he
on
said,
television.
yeah, maybe.
Because I remember. I think I
I
remember
had
seeing him on
I
television.
had on a green suit. He was standing right there next to me, but I did the talking.
Okay.
You check that out to make sure, because
Okay.
we can forget that. But I know
Right.
he came to me and asked me to tell people that he was ineligible. And they said, and Carl Albert, I never will forget. Will the speaker from Georgia identify himself? He never did. That's the way that went down. Now, if Julian spoke, it was later.
Okay.
It was later. So that was funny.
What was your encounters with the Maddox bunch?
We
during
almost had fights. I can't remember. There were pushes. Oh yeah, that's nothing wrong. There were pushes among us, and like Denmark Grover, since you mentioned that, was in that Maddox delegation. There were threats. I can't say where they came from, but it was a very ugly scene. Now you have to keep in mind that the press was working around the floor, talking about there's a riot going on outside. So all this was going on. It was pandemonium on the floor. Someone, Ken Bodie, I never will forget Ken. Ken came over to our delegation. Ken is now a big correspondent on one of these television shows.
How do you spell
He was
his
with
last
New
name?
Republic
Okay.
at the time.
How do you spell his last name?
B-O-D-E.
Okay.
Ken Bodie.
Right.
Ken, it looked like to me it could have been Sam Donaldson. I don't know. They were all young folk around there trying to get us to say inflammatory things. And then they were talking about the riot outside and what's going to happen to Mayor Daley. Oh, it got really wild on that floor. Matter of fact, I must say I got a little frightened, because of all the stuff that was going on.
And that was also right after that, but I guess because of your credentials challenge, that the five guys bolted from the Democratic Party to the Georgia Republican Party, right? Jack Ray, Crawford Pilcher, Phil Campbell,
Jimmy Bentley,
and somebody else. There's five. Weren't there like 4 or 5 of them?
Oh, they were big shots, and they all lost later next election. Never heard another word from them.
I mean, you said you were. When you described the tension between you and the Maddox delegation, maybe you could, elaborate a bit more on that, or the process before the committee.
Well, I don't know what else to say about that, Cliff. Other than I had so many different emotional strains going. One between me and Julian, the other between me and the Lester Maddox, and McCarthy and then McGovern. Humphrey, and just trying to enjoy Chicago. All of that was so tough.
And a riot outside.
I didn't even know about the riot until those newspaper people came in there and told us.
Okay, going through that, and then after that, sort of, how did you feel at the time?
Well, I felt accomplished. I felt that we had accomplished something. Number one, by getting a chance to vote. I mean, it's the first time I voted at a convention. I was at half a vote. And my half a vote went for Humphrey. But that I felt very proud about. Although we didn't have a whole victory, we had a half a victory. It was either that or more chaos. So I thought we did the party some good.
And then, how did this affect, both in the short term and the long term, your relationship with Julian?
Well, I didn't let it affect anything from my perspective. I don't know how he felt, because Julian don't talk about things like that. I mean, you don't know how Julian is feeling. He's not an expressive person in that regard to friends. Now, he might be different to his wife or something, but I don't know about his children. But I didn't let it bother me. I just let it go. I said, well, that's just the way that is. Because the guy is someone whom I greatly love. I love him. And we've known each other for so long. It's been 40 years now.
But you were talking at the moment, though, of your emotional...
But I was mad at the time. I was just angry. But then I calmed down, and I said, well, now that's just the way he's reacting. Monday he'll tell me what he wants to tell me about how he acted and why he did what he did. I never will understand how and why he did that McCarthy thing. The way he did it. All he had to do was tell me, because it wasn't like I was sitting around not communicating with him. I was constantly trying to get him involved in the reform movement. And it wasn't as much about a candidate as it was about a process of assuring that he and I could have a chance to go to a convention, or anybody else that looked like us, It wasn't about that at all. And that's what really freaked me out. I just said, what?
Well, who else was involved in the reform movement, in the Democratic Forum?
Well, Al Kerr, Betty Kerr, Jack Francis Turner, that whole group. I'm still trying to think of these young lawyers. John Blackman. John might not have been, but Travis Stewart. That's who I was trying to.
Travis Stewart, okay.
That was the listener. Travis was quietly involved because he was a big Humphrey man. At that time, he had gone up to Humphrey's staff, working for one of the big pharmaceuticals. But that's the guy that transformed from Lester Maddox, executive secretary, to Hubert Humphreys.
Well, this is actually a good segue back to the events of '66, and maybe we'll stop there. But let's go back. Kerr, if I'm not mistaken, was also involved in the Right in Georgia campaign. So let's go back to
Ellis Hall?
let's go back to '66. and the Maddox race, it involves Arnold in the primary, and then the write-in, Jimmy Carter running for governor, and a bunch of others, as I recall,
Well, it
too,
was basically Callaway, Arnold, and Maddox.
after the primary, right. And Arnold had lost to Maddox, I guess, in the primary, and then let's just describe that whole write-in Arnold, write-in Georgia effort, the choices, one way or the other, I gather, I read somewhere that you voted for Ellis.
Yeah, I
Okay.
voted for it.
Okay, let's talk. Well, anyway, let's talk
Well,
about
Ellis
that.
Allen
more.
was a hero to all of us. I mean, he was definitely out of time, out of step. And I don't know why he waited so late to come back. I mean, he was governor when he was 31 years old. And then he came back 35 years later. And the timing was off. But I was an Ellis Arnold supporter. And it was... I didn't think it would come off. I mean, just the dynamics, just write-ins, just don't do
Right.
that. But it was. I don't know what else to say about that, really, Cliff. I guess I'm just a little exhausted now.
Okay, you want
But
to break
let's
for today?
yeah, let's
Okay,
pray.
then-
'Cause I'm getting
A little bit tired, sure.
yeah.